All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today we are jumping headfirst into, well, the fascinating and often forbidden world of curse words. We're going to use the work of linguist John McWhorter to help us figure this all out.
And really, where else could we start but with a classic quote from the master himself, George Carlin. He just hits the nail on the head, right? He zeroes in on this central mystery. Why do we get so worked up, so captivated, and sometimes, terrified by what are basically just collections of sounds? So that's really the core question for us today. If they're just words, where does all that power come from? The power to shock, to offend, and, let's be honest, sometimes to give us this weird sense of relief.
It's a genuine puzzle, It's not just about being rude or having bad manners. And to find the answer, we're not going to look in a dictionary. Nope. We have to look deep inside our own heads.
Okay, so let's get into our first big clue. And this one comes straight from neuroscience. It turns out your brain treats curse words completely differently than regular language. Like, not even in the same ballpark. I mean, check this out. It's this clear split. You say a normal word, something like boy or run, and the logical, orderly left side of your brain lights up. But a curse word? Whoa! That just erupts from the emotional, impulsive right side. We're talking about the same neighborhood in your brain that handles things like fear and excitement.
So here's the key takeaway. When you stub your toe and scream a curse word, you're not really describing anything. It's more like a purely emotional squawk. Think of it less like a carefully chosen word like table and more like an animal's yelp of pain. It's a gut reaction.
Okay, so if the power comes from this emotional punch, from breaking a taboo, then that begs the question, what exactly is taboo? Well, as it turns out, the answer to that has changed a lot over the centuries.
And this timeline really lays it all out. You can see how profanity has moved through these three big phases. Each one is defined by what society at the time thought was the absolute worst thing you could do or say. First, it was all about God. Then it became about the body. And now we're in an era where the most powerful, nasty words are all about groups of people.
So back in that first era, the number one taboo was religion. The word swearing literally meant you were swearing a holy oath. So to do it casually, to take God's name in vain, that was a huge deal. The really shocking stuff wasn't about sex or anything like that. It was about damning someone to hell or, and this is a weird one, swearing on parts of Christ's body. And you can see this whole religious taboo thing play out perfectly right here. I mean, the word darn, it's so harmless, right? But its history is this amazing game of linguistic telephone. It's basically a watered-down version of by the eternal God. It was a way for people to get that same emotional kick without, actually committing a sin.
But then, a massive cultural earthquake hits, the Protestant Reformation, and it totally shifts the focus of sin. It's not so much about the heavens anymore. Now it's about something much, much closer to home, our own bodies and all their, messy, private functions.
And with that big shift, a whole new category of curse words comes into play. Words like fuck and shit suddenly become the new nasty words. And this is crazy. Before this, they were so casual that you could find a guy in court records literally named Roger Fuckbeath the Naval. But now, they get shoved into the gutter. That little note from the monk is the perfect snapshot of this transition. He felt he had to abbreviate damned because it was still so powerful. But fucking? Nah, that was just a regular old adjective.
Okay, now this is where things get really wild. You might think profanity is just chaotic, right? Just breaking all the rules. But it turns out even profanity follows its own very strict, very specific, and totally unspoken grammatical rules.
So let's start with a totally normal sentence. If I say, I would even play the maid, what am I really saying? The word even implies there's the scale of rules, and the maid is way down at the bottom, the least desirable one. Okay, now think about how you'd actually say that more casually. You'd probably say, hell, I'd play the maid. Notice that the word hell is doing the exact same job grammatically as the word even. It's pointing to that same unspoken scale.
So what's going on? Well, hell has actually evolved. It's not just a curse anymore. It's become what linguists call a scalar particle. It's a surprisingly sophisticated piece of grammar that we all use for emphasis, and it all started as a word for eternal damnation. How cool is that?
But wait, it gets even weirder. There's another rule that you follow perfectly every single time, and I guarantee nobody ever sat you down and taught you this. It has a fancy name, expletive infixation, but it's basically about where you can stick a curse word inside of another word.
Just think about it. Fan-fucking-tastic. Sounds right, doesn't it? Abso-fucking-lutely. Yep, that works too. But what about are-fucking-tistic? No way. It just sounds wrong. The rule, which your brain just knows, is that the curse word has to go right before the stressed syllable. It's a weirdly elegant rule for something we think of as so messy.
So there it is, one single unspoken rule that pretty much every English speaker on the planet follows perfectly without ever being taught. That's the secret grammar hiding behind all the shouting.
All right, so where does all this leave us? I think the big picture is that the power of these words isn't really in the words themselves, right? It's in the social taboos that they give us permission to break. And here's the thing, culture never stands still. As society evolves, so do our taboos. And when the taboos change, well, our supply of curse words has to get refreshed too. Old words lose their sting, and new ones pop up to take their place. And that brings us right up to today, to that third era of profanity. Now, for a lot of people, the words that deliver that real, visceral, right-brain shock, they're not about God, they're not about the bathroom, they're slurs. The words used to attack and demean whole groups of people.
Which leads us to our final big idea here, and McWhorter sums it up perfectly. It seems like our need for these kinds of words, these taboo-breaking, super-emotional words, is fundamental to being human. Language just has to have some kind of pressure release valve for all that raw, impulsive, right-brain energy.
So let's end on a final thought, looking to the future. We've seen this incredible evolution, from God to the body to groups. The words themselves are always going to change, but that basic human need for them, that seems permanent. So it really makes you wonder, doesn't it? What will be the nasty words of the future? What words will our grandkids' grandkids be afraid to say out loud?